Oh, that's dangerous.
Hi, welcome to Keeping Runners on the Road. I'm Molly. We have Dr. Mark Humbert with us today. As we mentioned last week, we are talking about the Masters athlete. So the athlete that is a little bit older. And today we're going to talk about training around perimenopause and menopause. So take it away.
So this was like fascinating subject.
Very cool, yeah.
And definitely something that really hasn't gotten a lot of press, right? We pay a lot of attention to the kind of female athlete triad, right? That's earlier. Typically, that's kind of around high school and college aged women, and definitely a lot of things to think about and intervene there. You can check out our video on that from a couple of weeks ago. But around menopause, some really interesting training considerations and some changes to be aware of. So that we can intervene at specific periods. See what I did there? to help mitigate some of those changes. And so, right, there's a whole host of things that we think of with menopause, right? The hot flashes probably being the most common one.
Mm-hmm.
That's when women typically notice like, hey, I feel like I'm putting on weight more easily than usual, or I can't, or maybe I'm feeling more fatigued. The interesting thing is that menopause itself is really just an event. And so it's specific criteria. So a year without a period. And so we have before that perimenopause, right? The time leading up to that, and then postmenopause after that kind of event. But there's some really important changes taking place in that perimenopause period that we want to, that works well. I guess I say that word a lot, that we want to be aware of. And so typically that's around 45. And so it's about the 5 years after that leading up to menopause around age 50.
Mm-hmm.
For some, it's sooner. It can start as soon as age 36 or 37 and can end up taking about like 10 plus years. But for most women, it starts around 45 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously, as we know, right, hormones are changing in that time. And in general, right, we're seeing a reduction in two of the major female hormones, estrogen and progesterone. And you still are producing a form of estrogen when you go into postmenopause, but it's a different form than the one that we usually talk about when we identify estrogen. It's about 10 times less potent. And so it doesn't have the same effects that we see with estrogen. So it's all about preparation. What happens is a certain point, we have progesterone drop quite a bit, and estrogen stays higher. And so this is the time that we want to take advantage, because estrogen has some really amazing effects, right? As we all know, right?
Yes.
And so in that time when it's higher, so estrogen has what are called anabolic effects, right? That's just, it's building effects. So it has positive effects on bone density, on the contractile properties of tissue. It has potent anti-inflammatory effects. It has effects on our insulin sensitivity, and then on our brain function. So it helps to get serotonin to the brain. And so what we do in that phase when it's higher is that we want to take advantage of all those effects, so that we can, as I say I have no part in this. So full disclaimer, I am a man. I'm well aware of that. So I use we just to be able to describe the topic. We, yes. Great. Yeah, you're not in my world, Mark. Totally understand. So taking advantage of those effects while they're happening, so that the changes that happen as you age are more related to age-related changes versus having to deal so much with the fallout from the hormonal changes and the hormonal imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll talk again about some of those specific things that estrogen does and what we can do. But let's talk about some of the training things that we want to do to take advantage of those changes. What are the types of training that we want to be involved in, and why?
For sure. So in perimenopause, you want to focus more on HIIT training, so high intensity interval training, and more heavy resistance training, so more really heavy weight and low reps.
Yeah. So again, you'll hear that in all our videos: high weight, lower reps, which is interesting because that's a shift from what we typically see as women age, right? A lot of it's focused on body weight workouts and maybe just more low intensity, long duration stuff, which is still like those are still great for exercise and again for overall health. Like any exercise regime is going to be good, right? Activity is better than no activity. But again, like I said, with estrogen, is when that drops, right? We lose those muscle building effects. We're more likely to have decreased bone density. And what high load training does is it helps to increase bone density, right? It's a large enough signal to our bones that we need to have an adaptation. And then in terms of the contractile properties of muscle, that higher load tends to activate better those pathways that lead to increases in muscle size and increases in muscle force production. And so if we take advantage of those and build bodies stronger, right? Have a really solid strength training routine put in with that high load. And then also adding in things like plyometrics, right? So high load as well as plyometric activities are going to be a stimulus for the bones to adapt and strengthen. And so we do that while estrogen is high so that when that drop comes, we've kind of bulletproofed ourselves, right? There's a solid strength training routine, right? Muscles have been built stronger, bones have been built denser. And so it mitigates a lot of those effects.
So basically, if you stick to 80-20, you'll be fine.
Yeah. So that at any age, right? That periodized training with a focus on about 80%, I almost switched it, about 80% low intensity and then 20% high intensity gives us a really great ratio for the adaptations that we want to see, right? Building that aerobic base, building the endurance, that engine that can keep performing, but then those high intensity, right? The effects on speed, on power, and on some of the contractile properties of our tissues and bone density, right? Incorporating plyometrics into those high intensity exercises.
Now, there's some changes that we, and I can say we,
yes, there you go,
need to make regarding our diet as well, right?
Yeah. So super important. So a couple of the things. One is I talked about estrogen having an effect on insulin sensitivity, right? So you don't have to remember that exactly, but what that means for our diet is that we aren't going to be as good at utilizing carbs as we were before. It's going to be more likely to go into storage, right? To build those fat reserves. So what we want to do, we still need carbohydrate, right? To fuel us and to keep us going. And I'll talk about some of the other effects of carbohydrates and why those are still important to have in the diet. But if we do that around exercise, it helps the body use that better. So when we're exercising, it brings more receptors to the cell membrane that can pull that sugar into the cell, right? And pull that carbohydrate into the cell. And so if you're choosing the higher carbohydrate intake around the times that you're exercising, then you'll utilize that better for what it needs to be used for, right? The cells are going to be better at pulling that in. And then in those other times, focus more on lean protein and on high quality fat sources. Maybe more plant-based, getting all those nutrients.
Focusing on anti-inflammatory.
Yes. Again, so estrogen has anti-inflammatory effects. And so when we lose that, we tend to get more system-wide inflammation. And so being able to have a diet and lifestyle behaviors that promote anti-inflammatory activities in our body, all the better. So low on processed foods, high on a colorful, wide variety diet it ends up being really helpful. So the reason that we need carbohydrates is, estrogen has so many amazing effects. I think it's underappreciated. So yes. So one of the other things that it does is it helps with bringing serotonin across the blood-brain barrier, and keeping us happy, and also helps with the production of what's called brain-derived neurotrophic factor or neurotrophic factor. Anyway, don't need to remember that name. What you need to know is it helps with neuroplasticity, right? The brain being able to adapt, to learn, effects on memory. And so a fair amount of that is actually produced in the gut. And so we need material for the gut microbes to ferment and to produce that. And so carbohydrate, right? High fiber diets leave things for our gut bacteria to snack on. And so, but we want to make sure those sources are really good sources, right? So your colorful diets, right? Greens, yellows, reds, purples, and those can't be Skittles. It's got to be like, let's make it plants and fruits. Love Skittles
Yes.
though. So that's one of the really important reasons why we want to kind of modify our diet. Another thing, again, why the protein intake becomes important. A couple reasons. One, we just require more protein at each meal as we age, right? It takes a little bit more to kind of make sure that we're, getting those building blocks out to where they need to go when they need to be there. But when we have that higher protein diet, it gives us certain amino acids that we need for building bone, muscle, tendon, things like that. But remember, I talked before about that serotonin. So estrogen helps to bring serotonin across and into the brain. And so it's really great in that there's that time in perimenopause where there's that surge. And so more serotonin is being delivered to the brain. But when that drops, we can see women develop depressive symptoms around that. And so leucine, which is one of the amino acids, so you can get that in lean meats. It's in higher amount in like whey isolate sources. That also helps to traffic serotonin across the blood-brain barrier. And so having a higher protein diet will help to mitigate some of the losses in serotonin and help to keep mood a little bit more stable. And so not only does it have benefits in terms of building muscle, building tendon, building bone, but in terms of how our brain's feeling and how our brain's functioning. So
awesome. Good stuff. Lots of good stuff. So long story short, create healthy habits now. Create an exercise routine, eat healthy food, and take care of yourself.
Yeah. And doing that, right, that's going to leave you feeling good at any age, right? Mm-hmm. We know that having a healthy diet, having healthy, exercise patterns, sleep and stress patterns, things like that are great. Mm-hmm. But especially with going through perimenopause, something to be aware of so you can intervene early and often and make those changes that keep you healthy and running and active throughout your life. But it helps knowing, those specific changes that are going to happen in your body, specific things to be aware of, so that you can act early and get the help you need, right? Whether that's from your physician, whether that's from your physical therapist, or other health practitioners that can help you dial in things best for your body, and make sure that you keep healthy and keep moving and keep active your whole life.
Awesome. Well, thanks for watching Keeping Runners on the Road. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. If you have any questions, go ahead and comment below or send us a message and share this with somebody who you think needs it. Thanks.